Hello, everybody. Even if I read through today's or this week's Being with Jesus, we talk about body life. And today, interestingly, at the bottom of our reading, the question is, how does God's love empower me to love one another? So I believe the whole issue is about how to love one another. So based on that, I'm just going to today's sharing will be a very simple or two passages from the Bible. All of us know that well. These two passages, they are very familiar to us, which is Jesus' commandment to us love each other. But before that, let us enjoy the song. It's a very familiar song.
Commandment I give unto you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you love one another as I have loved you. By this the world will know that you are my disciples, if you have love one for another. By this the world will know that you are my disciples, if you have love one for another. By this the world will know that you are my disciples, if you have love one for another. By this the world will know that you are my disciples, if you have love one for another.
How many do not know this song? I think everybody should know this song. And just dawned on me that I sang this song 40 years ago during my NYF day. So that reveals my age already. Yeah. So it's a very familiar song that we sang during our so-called youth day. So that's why today my sharing will be just based on these two verses, which is taken from John chapter 13, okay, verse 34 to 35. If I may just read it to you, okay, I'm reading from the NLT version, John chapter 13, verse 34. So now I am giving you a new commandment. Love each other, just as I have loved you. You should love each other. Verse 35. Your love for one another will prove to the world that you are my disciples. Now, if we look at the Old Testament, what Jesus was referring to, there were a few passages in the Old Testament where God has given the command to the Israelites. And most of the time, people will refer to in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18. And this is how it reads: do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against anyone among your people, but love your neighbor. So I put there the bracket fellow Israelites because this is what most commentaries will say. At that point in time, the neighbors are people of the same race, fellow Israelites, as yourself, and I'm the Lord. And further down in Leviticus 19, this is where the love branches off to people who are not of your own so-called race. And it reads, the alien living with you must be treated as one of your native born. Love him as yourself, for you were aliens in Egypt. I am the Lord your God. And then the next one is the most so-called quoted verse about God, love our God, which is in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4 to 6. Okay, so these are very familiar verses. So it's based on this background, and this is when Jesus, when he preached or he gave the commandments to his disciples. These verses are, in a sense, the background when he told his disciples to love one another. So today my sharing is just very simple. Three simple points. Let me move on my slide. First one, it is our commandment to love. Because if we just use Leviticus, like when the lawyer was asking Jesus in Matthew 22, they were trying to fulfill a lot of don't do rules. But then Jesus summarized everything as God's commandment. If you read in Matthew 22, okay, and also in Luke 10:27, Jesus gave very simple point, which is number one, love God. Number two, love our neighbor. So what Jesus was telling us even today is when we love God, we will love our neighbors naturally. It is as simple as that. Rather than trying to stick to some very rigid or stringent rule, don't do this, don't do that. Jesus' command is very simple. Love God, and we will naturally love our neighbors. So he is turning us from don't do by focusing on what we can do to love God and our neighbor. So if we love God, naturally we will love our neighbors if we are Christ followers. This is the first part of John 13, okay, verse 34. A new commandment I give to you, love one another. So if we refer to 1 John chapter 3, verse 18, it is reminding us again, let us not love with word or speech, but with actions and in truth. So the first point, what I want to share with everybody, in a sense, when you're in your own devotion time, is instead of focusing on the don't do, focusing on what Jesus has summarized. Love God, and we will love our neighbors naturally. Now, I'll come to the neighbors part later on. And when I come to that part, I need a pastor to stop the recording. Okay, I'll tell pastor when to stop the recording, obviously because of what I'm going to share. Okay. All right. So I hope the first point is quite straightforward. It is love God. You don't have to struggle to love your neighbors because it will come naturally. Okay. Number two, what is the inspiration to love? Because Jesus told us, you are inspired because I have loved you, which is in the second part of John 13, verse 34. Because I have loved you, as being that you don't need any motivation, we don't need any inspiration. Because the only inspiration that we want to love one another because we have received love first from God. And John 15, chapter 10, if you just flip to the next page of the Bible, when Jesus is talking about the vine and the branches, this love is stemmed from us being connected to the vine, which is Jesus, and we obey him. And when we are connected to him, this love will naturally flow from the vine into us being his branches. And Jesus reminds his disciples again in John chapter 15, verse 12, same thing, a commandment I give you, love one another. So God doesn't make mistake. Why would Jesus want to repeat this again, second time, love one another as a new commandment? Because he is emphasizing again and again to us, once you are connected to God, once you are connected to Jesus, okay, love will naturally flow from the vine to us. Okay, same thing as we go back to the first point I shared. Once we love God, it will come naturally. And we are living example of God's love. Okay, and I just quote from 1 John chapter 4, verse 7 and verse 19. 1 John chapter 4, verse 7, okay, is reminding us, let us love one another, for love comes from God. And everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. A few verses down in 1 John chapter 4:19, we love because he first loved us. So I believe this should be the basics of our inspirations when if we are struggling to love one another. These verses should remind us over and over again. Okay, we cannot resist not to love one another because God has loved us first. And the passage here is very clear. Okay, and then of course, to receive that love, we need to be connected to Jesus, which is our vine. Okay, so the first I talk about our commandment to love. Number two, it is inspiration of love. The third one is the outcome. If you read again, John 13, verse 35, Jesus is showing us actually the simplest way to do mission and fulfill the Great Commission. Because the simplest way is if you love, you will prove to the world that you are my disciple. It doesn't mean that you must go to a third world country, you must suffer, you must be persecuted. But the clearest and simplest way Jesus say to do mission is just love because you are proving to the world that you are my disciple. So I put down there 2 points. In our strength, that means that when we are strong, within the body of Christ, love our members, love our DG member, love those outside our church walls. That is when we have the strength and the unity as the body of Christ. That will prove to the world that because we love them, we are Jesus' disciple. But the flip side of it is in our weakness. We are living in a fallen world. Nobody is perfect. Pastor has said that many times. And we are all sinners, and yet we are all work in progress. See, immediately if you read John 13, when Jesus has given the new commandment, he predicted Peter will fall 3 times, even though Peter denied it. But we know, lo and behold, Peter denied Jesus. So yet you can see in weakness, even though Peter fell, yet he triumphed because he kept his faith in the one who loved him first. And because he triumphed, people from history until today recognize that Peter is like a leader of Jesus' disciple. And he has proven to the world because of his faithfulness, even though he has his own weakness by denying Jesus. He is proving to the world that by loving one another, we are Christ's disciple. So the third point, very simple, is what is the outcome? The outcome is as simple as we love one another, those we don't know, strangers, and by this people we know we are Jesus' disciple. So the last slide is I want to share is just like in Luke chapter 10, when the man asked Jesus about who is my neighbors, how do I love the neighbors? After Jesus explained everything about the Good Samaritan, when Jesus said, now which of you would say is a good neighbor? If you read the Bible, the man didn't reply the Samaritan. If you can find the translation or version that the man replied, he said, the Samaritan, please let me know. All the version that I checked, what did the guy say? The one who showed him mercy. See, even until that point, the guy, the man, he still thinks he is higher class or higher caste. He refused to mention the name of the Samaritan. He just said the man who showed mercy. Then Jesus just answered, now go and do the same. So Jesus is reminding us again, now go and do the same. Go and love one another. Okay, so I hope this simple sharing again remind us, because today's, the food for thought is how do we love one another? How do we love our DG member? Just follow what Jesus said. You have read, you have heard the story of the Samaritan. Now go and do the same.